She was a quiet girl, the kind who moved through life without making waves. People saw her as ordinary, someone who blended into the background. She did not speak much and avoided attention. Her clothes were simple, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and her shoes were worn from years of walking to school and back. She did not care for showing off, and she preferred to keep her talents hidden. Many in her town did not know that beneath that quiet exterior, she carried a gift that could surprise everyone. From a young age, she had been drawn to music. The piano was her sanctuary, a place where the world's noise faded and she could breathe. She had no formal lessons, no wealthy teachers or fancy studios. Her piano was old, the keys slightly uneven, and the bench creaked under her weight, but to her, it was a treasure. She would spend hours practicing, learning pieces she heard on the radio, in movies, or on recordings. She copied the music by ear, memorizing each note and practicing until her fingers could move on their own. At school and in her neighborhood, few people knew of her talent. When classmates played games or chatted in the yard, she would often sit on the steps, quietly watching, her mind replaying melodies and rhythms. Some children teased her for being different. They called her shy, awkward, and even useless. She ignored them, focusing instead on her music, which gave her comfort and strength. Music was the only thing that made the world feel fair. One day, there was a public gathering in the town hall. It was a simple event, meant to showcase local talent. Students were invited, as well as townspeople who wanted to enjoy an afternoon of music and stories. She had no plans to participate. She had never performed in public, never needed recognition. But her teacher, someone who saw her potential, had entered her name without telling her. They thought it was time for the world to see her skill. On the day of the event, the hall was crowded. People were laughing, chatting, and moving around, not paying much attention to the stage. The stage itself was small, with a polished piano at the center. She sat in the audience, heart racing. Her stomach twisted into knots. The teacher leaned over and whispered that she would need to play a difficult piece, something that tested every musician. Her hands shook as she realized what was about to happen. She had played challenging pieces at home, yes, but never in front of strangers, never under pressure. When it was her turn, the room quieted slightly. Some students whispered to each other, unsure why she was on stage. Some adults smiled politely, not expecting much. A few people snickered, thinking they were about to watch a failure. She walked to the piano slowly, feeling the weight of every eye on her. The lights above the stage seemed brighter than usual, and her heart pounded so loudly she thought they could hear it. She sat down on the creaking bench, fingers hovering above the keys. The piece she was expected to play was famous for being nearly impossible. It was filled with fast passages, tricky rhythms, and notes that seemed to leap across the keyboard. Most experienced pianists approached it carefully, rehearsing for months. She had practiced it, yes, but never like this. The pressure of everyone watching made her nervous, yet a strange calm washed over her at the same time. She remembered all the evenings she had spent alone, learning music from the radio, from recordings, from memory. This was just another moment to play. The room grew still. Some people were leaning forward, curious. Others were whispering, waiting for a mistake. Her hands trembled, but she took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the first notes. A few notes rang out softly, almost hesitant. A murmur passed through the audience. Some people frowned, thinking she would falter. Her fingers moved again, repeating the sequence she had practiced countless times. The sound grew clearer, stronger, more confident. As she continued, a strange thing happened. The music began to flow from her as if it had always lived inside her fingers. Each note landed where it should. Each chord resonated with emotion. The difficult sections came, and she navigated them carefully. The room was quiet now, every eye on her. No one spoke. Even those who had been mocking her quietly now looked surprised. She was not just playing. She was telling a story with her music. The notes carried sadness, hope, tension, joy all at once. Some of the older musicians in the audience began to nod subtly, recognizing skill when they saw it. She moved through the piece with a grace that made it seem effortless. Every mistake she might have made at home was gone. Her focus was absolute. The pressure of being watched only sharpened her abilities. She realized that this moment, terrifying as it was also freeing. For the first time, she felt the music not as practice, but as performance. The audience began to lean in. Whispers of astonishment spread quietly. The students who had teased her before were wide-eyed, unable to comprehend that this quiet girl could produce such powerful music. The adults were holding their breath, afraid to break the spell. She had taken something ordinary as simple. Piano in a small town hall and transformed it to a gateway to another world. Even as she approached the most difficult part of the piece, the fast and intricate section that could easily unravel her performance, she felt calm. Her hands moved with memory and instinct. She had practiced, yes, but she had also lived every note in her imagination. Every late night, every lonely hour, every tear and frustration had prepared her for this. The audience could sense the emotion and control, and slowly the skepticism faded. Only the music remained, carrying them along. At that moment, she was no longer the quiet girl no one noticed. She was a master, commanding the piano with a skill that seemed impossible given her background. The audience sat in awe, some whispering to each other, some simply staring, unable to speak. It was not just technical skill that impressed them, it was the heart behind the music. The story that came through without a single word. They could see her life in every note, her struggles, her dreams. Her quiet strength, by the time she finished, a heavy silence hung in the hall. No one moved at first. They were not sure how to react, their expectations shattered. Then slowly applause began, starting with one person, then another, until the hall filled with the sound of admiration. Some people were on their feet, clapping and cheering. She stood quietly, a small smile on her face, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She had faced a challenge no one thought she could meet, and had proven her skill without needing to boast or explain. In that moment, she realized something important. Talent does not need to be announced. It does not need to be flashy or loud. True mastery comes from dedication, practice, and heart. She had been underestimated, doubted, and even forced into a situation meant to humiliate her. Yet she had turned it into a triumph, showing everyone the power of quiet determination and hidden skill. The experience would stay with her forever, not because of the applause, but because she had discovered her own strength in the face of fear. As she left the stage, people looked at her with new eyes. The quiet girl who had been ignored and mocked was now someone they could not forget. She walked back to her seat, heart still racing but filled with calm satisfaction. She had faced the impossible and had emerged victorious, proving that true talent cannot be hidden for long, and when it is finally seen, it can shock and inspire everyone. As she walked away from the piano, her hands still tingled from the effort and her mind replayed every note she had just played. The applause from the audience still echoed in her ears, but she did not turn to soak in their admiration. She had learned long ago that true satisfaction came from within, not from praise. She returned to her seat, her back straight yet inside her heart. A mixture of fear, relief, and something she could not yet name stirred. The room slowly returned to normal, people chatting quietly among themselves, but many of their eyes kept drifting back toward her. They were still processing what they had witnessed. Whispers floated around about how such a quiet, unassuming girl could possess such skill. Some of the older musicians shook their heads in disbelief, their eyebrows raised, clearly impressed. She noticed none of it. She was too focused on her own thoughts, trying to calm her racing heart. After the event ended, she made her way outside. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow across the town. She paused for a moment, feeling the breeze on her face. Memories of her past began to rise, unbidden, as if the music had unlocked a door in her mind. She remembered the first time she had touched a piano, the way her fingers had hesitated over the keys, unsure of what to do. Back then, she had no one to guide her. No teacher had been there to encourage her. She had learned to play by listening, by copying melodies. By feeling the music deep in her heart, her thoughts wandered to the evenings spent alone at home, practicing for hours on end. The world outside was busy and loud, but inside her room, she had discovered a universe of sound. There were nights when she had cried, frustrated because she could not master a particular passage. She remembered the aches in her fingers, the blisters on her hands, and the long hours of repetition that seemed endless. Yet she had always returned to the piano, driven by an unexplainable need to keep playing, even though she had practiced in solitude. She had always imagined a day when someone would notice her talent, but that thought had remained a secret wish, never spoken aloud. The music was for her, not for anyone else. And yet today she had been seen. The experience was overwhelming in ways she had not expected. It was strange to feel both proud and anxious, as if the applauses received were both comforting and frightening at the same time. The memory of the room, the faces of the audience, and the intensity of the moment returned to her mind. She recalled how she had started hesitantly, her first notes shaky and uncertain. She had almost doubted herself in those first moments. But then, something had shifted. The music seemed to take over her body, her fingers moving as if they had a life of their own. Every chord, every trill, every rapid passage felt natural. It was not just skill, but emotion, experience, countless hours of practice that had carried her through. She thought about the people who had doubted her, the whispers of mockery that had filled the room at first. It was not the first time she had faced judgment or underestimation. In her life, she had often been overlooked, dismissed, or assumed incapable. But the piano had always been her answer. Through music, she had proven to herself, even when no one else had noticed, she was capable of more than anyone expected. As she walked through the quiet streets, the town seemed different somehow. The colors of the sunset, the sound of distant voices, the rustling of leaves, all of it felt more vivid. It was as if her music had opened her senses in a new way. She realized that the piano had not only been a source of comfort, but also a lens through which she understood the world. Every note she played was shaped by what she had experienced. By every struggle and joy she had known, she reached a small park near her home and sat on a bench. The bench was worn, the wood rough beneath her hands, but it was a place she had always liked. She let her thoughts settle, reflecting on the afternoon. The applause, the surprise, and the awe of the audience had been remarkable. But the deeper feeling was a quiet sense of validation. She had faced an impossible challenge and emerged intact. She had not only survived the pressure, but had transformed it into something beautiful. Her mind wandered further back to her early childhood. She remembered sneaking into the living room late at night to play the old upright piano that had been in the house for years. Her family had been busy with work and daily life, rarely paying attention to her interests. Yet the piano had been a constant companion, a friend she could always rely on. She had learned patience and perseverance from those nights of solitary practice, and now those lessons had borne fruit. The memory of failure also surfaced. There had been many moments when she had thought she would never improve, times when her fingers refused to cooperate or the music felt too complicated. She recalled the frustration of mistakes, the sound of wrong notes echoing in her small room. And yet, she had never given up. Every error had been a lesson, every struggle a step toward mastery. She understood now that her quiet persistence had shaped her skill more than talent alone ever could. Evening turned to night, and the stars began to appear in the sky. She sat quietly, letting the music she had played linger in her mind. The sense of accomplishment was still there, but it was accompanied by a deeper awareness of the journey that had brought her here. Her hands, though tired, still tingled with the memory of the piano keys. Her heart was calm now, the adrenaline fading but leaving a quiet strength behind. She thought about the future. Perhaps there would be other performances, other audiences, other challenges. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The experience had opened a door, and she knew that she could not return to complete anonymity. People would expect more from her now, and she would have to rise to those expectations. But the thought did not scare her as it might have in the past. She had faced fear and pressure before. She had succeeded. As she walked the remaining distance home, she reflected on the lesson she had learned that day. True talent is not measured by appearances or assumptions. It is shaped by dedication, perseverance, and the courage to face challenges even when others doubt you. She realized that music had given her a voice when she had none, power when she had been powerless. and courage when fear had threatened to hold her back. That night, she returned to her room and sat at her piano once more. The keys felt familiar under her fingers, warm and ready. She did not play for an audience or for anyone's approval. She played for herself, for the quiet satisfaction of creation. The music flowed naturally, and she felt a sense of freedom that was almost tangible. It was a continuation of the journey she had started long ago, a journey that had taught her that mastery is built in moments of solitude and struggle, not in applause. As the notes filled the room, she understood something else. The music was not just about skill or technical ability. It was about life itself, the struggles, the triumphs, the hidden moments of joy and sorrow. Every note carried meaning, and every passage reflected a part of her story. She realized that the true power of her music was in its ability to convey emotion, to touch hearts even without words. The afternoon's performance had been just a glimpse of what she could do. But the depth of her art was far greater, and any audience could see in a single moment. She continued to play long into the night, exploring new melodies, experimenting with rhythm, and discovering nuances she had not noticed before. The music carried her, lifting her above fear and doubt, and she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that words could not describe. In those hours, she found clarity and purpose, realizing that her journey as a pianist was just beginning, and that the challenges she would face in the future would be met with the quiet strength she had cultivated over years of dedication and love for her art. The next day, she woke up early, the memory of the previous afternoon still fresh in her mind. The applause, the looks of astonishment, and the quiet pride she had felt all swirled together. She dressed quickly and went outside for a walk. The air was crisp and fresh, and the streets were just beginning to fill with people heading to work and school. She moved quietly, her mind replaying the performance in detail. Every note, every chord, every pause in the music returned to her as if she were reliving it for the first time. As she walked, she noticed people glancing at her differently. Some nodded politely, others whispered to each other, and a few even smiled in recognition. The world seemed subtly changed. She realized that even though she had always thought of herself as invisible, people were beginning to notice. That recognition was both strange and comforting, but it also brought a new kind of pressure. Expectations had shifted. She understood that she could no longer remain. Completely anonymous, she made her way to the music room she had been using for practice. The old piano sat there quietly, waiting for her touch. She sat down and let her fingers hover above the keys, feeling the familiar texture and warmth. Today she was not playing for anyone but herself, yet the memory of the audience lingered. She wondered if she could ever capture that same intensity without an audience, without the heightened focus that fear and expectation had created. But as soon as she began to play, the notes came naturally, flowing with ease. The music carried her through memories, hopes, and emotions that words could never express. Hours passed unnoticed. She explored melodies she had not tried before, discovering new possibilities in familiar scales. The music seemed alive, responding to her touch and thought. Every mistake became a lesson, every challenge a new path to explore. She felt a growing confidence, a sense that she could handle more difficult pieces, more complex rhythms, and deeper emotions. She realized that her journey was far from over. This was only the beginning, a step on a path that stretched far beyond what she had imagined. Her thoughts returned to the people who had watched her performance. She remembered the skepticism on some faces and the disbelief on others. The memory made her smile softly. She had faced doubt and judgment and had transformed it into admiration. She knew that admiration could fade, that people's attention was fleeting, but the knowledge that she could rise to the challenge and succeed remained. It was a quiet power that she carried within herself. Later that day, she was invited to a small gathering of local musicians who wanted to meet her and hear her play again. She was nervous, unsure of what to expect. Some of these musicians were well known in the town, respected for their skill and experience. She had never met anyone like them before. Their interest was flattering but intimidating. Yet she decided to attend, determined to face whatever came next with the same focus and calm she had discovered in her performance at the gathering. She was greeted warmly, but with curiosity. The musicians asked questions about her training, her background, and her experiences. She answered honestly, explaining that she had mostly learned by herself, listening and practicing without formal guidance. Some nodded in surprise, impressed by her dedication and natural ability. Others exchanged glances, clearly calculating the extent of her talent. She felt a mixture of pride and humility. She did not seek fame or recognition, but she could not deny the satisfaction of being respected by people who truly understood music. When it was her turn to play, she approached the piano with steady steps. This time, the challenge was not imposed by anyone else. She had chosen to demonstrate her skill. She began with a familiar piece, then moved into something more complex. The room was quiet, filled only with the sound of the piano and the gentle hum of attention. She noticed the subtle nods of approval, the way fingers tapped lightly against benches in time with her music. She realized that her ability to convey emotion through music was as important as technical skill. Every note had meaning, every pause carried weight. As she progressed through the performance, she felt a deep connection to the audience. She could sense their emotions, their reactions, and she allowed the music to respond naturally. It was a conversation without words, a shared experience that transcended explanation. She felt the same thrill she had experienced on stage the day before. The same focus and intensity, but now tempered with a sense of purpose. She was no longer just proving herself. She was sharing a part of her soul. After the performance, she received praise, advice, and encouragement. Some offered to teach her new techniques. Others suggested advanced pieces that could challenge her further. She listened politely, grateful for their support, but she understood that her growth depended on her own dedication. She had learned to trust herself, to rely on her instincts and experience. The guidance was welcome, but the true work would always be her own. The evening ended, and she walked home under a sky full of stars. The town was quiet, peaceful, and she felt a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. Her mind wandered to the future, imagining possibilities that had once seemed impossible. She could see herself performing for larger audiences, exploring new musical styles, and continuing to develop her skill. Yet she also knew that the essence of her music would remain the same: honesty, motion, and dedication. In the days that followed, she continued to practice diligently. Each day brought new challenges and new discoveries. She experimented with tempo, dynamics, and phrasing. She explored compositions she had once thought too difficult. Breaking them down into manageable sections and mastering each one, she learned patience and persistence in new ways, understanding that mastery was not a destination but a lifelong journey. Her reputation slowly grew. People began to speak of the quiet girl who had amazed everyone with her piano mastery. Invitations to perform arrived, some informal, some more official. She faced each opportunity with the same careful focus, never letting fear or pride dictate her actions. She understood that the true value of her talent lay not in applause, but in the joy of playing and the ability to touch others. Through her music, she also began to reflect on the nature of fear and pressure. The experience of being forced to play a difficult piece had taught her something profound. Pressure was not an enemy. It was a tool, a way to sharpen focus and bring out the best in herself. Fear was not something to escape. It was something to understand and transform into energy and determination. These lessons extended beyond music, shaping her approach to life itself. One evening, she received a letter from someone who had attended the first performance. The letter was full of admiration, recounting how deeply the music had moved them. They spoke of how the performance had inspired them to pursue their own passions with greater dedication. She read the words carefully, feeling a warm sense of connection. Music, she realized, had a power that went beyond technique or skill. It could touch hearts, change perspectives, and inspire action. Her journey was no longer just her own. It was part of a larger story that extended to everyone who listened. As she sat at her piano late into the night, she contemplated the experiences that had brought her to this point. The quiet afternoons of practice, the struggles, the doubts. The moments of despair had shaped her into the musician she had become. She felt gratitude for those experiences, understanding that without them, she would not have discovered the depth of her own strength. Each note she played carried a piece of her story, a reflection of every challenge and triumph. Her thoughts also turned to the people who had doubted her, those who had whispered or laughed at the idea that she could succeed. She did not feel anger or resentment. Instead, she felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of justice in having transformed skepticism into admiration. Her music had spoken for her when words could not. It had revealed the truth about her abilities and her dedication. She understood that recognition was not the goal, but it was a natural consequence of passion and effort in the days that followed. She continued to grow both as a musician and as a person. She learned to balance technical skill with emotional expression, understanding that the two were inseparable. She developed a deeper awareness of her own limitations and strengths, approaching each new challenge with thoughtful preparation and confidence. Her journey was no longer just about proving herself to others. It was about exploring the full potential of her talent and sharing it with the world. She also began to mentor younger musicians who showed promise. She remembered the loneliness of her own early practice and wanted to provide guidance and encouragement. She shared techniques, offered advice, and inspired them to pursue their passions with dedication. In doing so, she realized that her music could create a ripple effect, influencing others in ways she had never anticipated. Her journey had begun in solitude, that was now connected to the lives of others through shared experience and inspiration. By the end of part 3, she had come to understand that true mastery was not about fame or recognition. It was about dedication, growth, and the courage to face challenges head-on. Her music had become a language of its own, a way to express what words could not capture. And with each performance, each practice session, in each interaction with others, she continued to discover the depth of her own abilities, the power of persistence, and the joy of sharing her gift with the world over time. She became known in her town as the girl with extraordinary piano skills. People no longer saw her as quiet or ordinary. They recognized her talent, dedication, and the emotion she put into every note. Invitations to perform came from small gatherings at first, then from larger events in nearby towns. Each opportunity was both exciting and nerve-wracking. She still felt nervous before performances, but now she had learned to transform that fear into focus and energy. One day, she was invited to perform at a large community hall. It was an important event, with musicians, teachers, and local officials present. She felt the familiar flutter of anxiety, but also a sense of purpose. She knew that this was another chance to share her music, to communicate without words, and to inspire people in the same way she had been inspired by music herself. As she approached the piano, she took a deep breath and let her fingers rest on the keys. She began to play slowly, letting the first notes fill the hall with a calm, gentle presence. People turned their attention to her, some leaning forward, others closing their eyes to absorb the music. She moved through the first section with care, listening to the sound, adjusting her touch, and letting the emotion guide her. Each note carried meaning, every chord expressed thought, and the hall became quiet, wrapped in the world she was creating. The difficult passages came fast and complex. She played them with precision, confidence, and feeling. The audience gasped quietly, recognizing that this was no ordinary performance. Her fingers danced across the keys with speed and grace, each movement deliberate and expressive. She felt the energy of the room, the subtle reactions of listeners, and she allowed that energy to flow through her music. It was a collaboration between her and everyone present, a silent conversation that needed no words. As the piece reached its climax, she focused deeply, her mind clear and present. The notes that once seemed impossible now felt like second nature. Her years of practice, the hours spent alone with the piano, and her quiet determination had prepared her for this moment. She played with intensity, bringing the music to life, filling the hall with power, beauty, and emotion. Tears formed in the eyes of some listeners while others watched in astonishment, unable to look away. When the final note faded, a long silence followed. The audience was still caught between disbelief and awe. Then, slowly, applause began. starting softly and growing louder until the hall was filled with clapping and cheers. Some people stood, moved by what they had witnessed. She smiled quietly, a small, humble smile, feeling the satisfaction of having shared something deeply personal and meaningful. After the performance, people approached her with praise, questions, and admiration. They asked about her journey, how she had learned so much without formal lessons, and how she had achieved such skill and emotion. She answered honestly, explaining that dedication, persistence, and love for music had carried her through. She emphasized that talent alone was not enough. It required practice, focus, and courage to face challenges. In the following days, her life began to change in small but significant ways. People respected her more, treated her kindly, and looked to her for inspiration. She continued to practice, explore new pieces, and refine her skills. She also began to help younger musicians, sharing her knowledge, encouraging them, and showing them the joy of music. She understood the importance of mentorship and how one person's guidance could help others reach their potential. She also reflected on her journey. She thought about the moments of doubt, the fear of failure, and the times when she had been underestimated. She realized that those experiences had shaped her, teaching her patience, resilience, and humility. They had made her stronger, more determined, and more compassionate. She understood that the obstacles she had faced were not setbacks, but opportunities to grow, to develop character, and to discover her own inner strength through music. She had found a voice that transcended words. She realized that her talent was not only a gift, but also a responsibility. It allowed her to connect with others, to inspire, and to touch hearts. She understood that every performance, no matter how small or large, was an opportunity to share her story and to make a difference in the lives of those who listened. She also learned the importance of humility. Despite her growing recognition, she remained grounded, understanding that skill and admiration could never replace the joy of playing music for its own sake. She continued to practice in solitude, exploring new techniques, experimenting with melodies, and discovering the depth of her own creativity. The piano remained a place of refuge, reflection, and growth, a constant companion on her journey. Over time, she became a symbol of quiet determination and hidden talent. People in her town and beyond came to respect her not only for her skill, but for her dedication, humility, and courage. She inspired others to pursue their passions, to persevere through challenges, and to believe in themselves even when others doubted them. Her story became a reminder that true mastery comes from within, nurtured through hard work, focus, and love for what you do. One day, she received an invitation to perform at a larger city event. With an audience that included professional musicians and music lovers from far away, she accepted, feeling both excitement and a sense of responsibility. She prepared diligently, practicing every day, refining her technique, and deepening her emotional connection to the music. She knew that this performance would be another opportunity to demonstrate not only her skill, but also the power of dedication, perseverance, and passion. When the day arrived, she took her place at the piano, her heart steady and her mind clear. The audience fell silent as she began to play, the first notes resonating with warmth and emotion. She moved through the piece with confidence, grace, and intensity, drawing the listeners into the world she created. Each passage was precise, each chord expressive, and the music seemed to fill the room with a presence that could be felt rather than merely heard. By the time she reached the final notes, the audience was completely captivated. The last chord faded into silence, and for a moment no one moved. Then, slowly, applause began, growing into a standing ovation. People cheered, clapped, and some even wiped tears from their eyes. She rose from the piano quietly, bowing with a humble smile. The experience was overwhelming, yet it was not about the applause or recognition. It was about the connection, the shared emotion, and the understanding that her music had reached people in a meaningful way as she walked off the stage. She felt a sense of fulfillment unlike any she had known before. Her journey, which had begun in quiet solitude, had brought her to this moment of shared experience and recognition. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities to grow and learn. But she also knew that she had the strength, skill, and passion to face them. Her journey as a musician and as a person was ongoing, filled with endless possibilities. That night, she returned home and sat at her piano, playing softly for herself. The music carried her through reflections on her journey, the people who had supported her, and the obstacles she had overcome. She felt gratitude for every experience, understanding that each had contributed to her growth and mastery. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a means of expression that allowed her to communicate the depths of her soul. In the quiet hours, she thought about the future. She imagined performing in new places, learning new styles, and continuing to explore the limitless possibilities of music. She also thought about mentoring others, sharing her experiences, and helping them discover the joy and power of dedication and creativity. She realized that her story was not just her own, but part of a larger tapestry, woven together by passion, perseverance, and the universal language of music. In the end, she understood that the journey was the reward. Every practice session, every performance, every challenge had shaped her into the person and musician she had become. Her mastery was not only in technique, but in heart, emotion, and connection. She had faced fear, pressure, and doubt, and had transformed them into music that inspired, moved, and touched people deeply. And she knew that as long as she continued to play with dedication and love, her journey would never truly end. And her music would continue to surprise, inspire, and resonate with everyone who listened. Months passed since she had first amazed the audience, and life had begun to take on a rhythm that balanced practice, performance, and quiet reflection. She had grown more confident with every note, every piece, and every audience she played for. Yet, despite recognition and invitations, she remained humble. Music was her true companion, and she played for its beauty, not for applause. Each day brought new challenges. She met them with a steady heart and disciplined hands. One morning, she received a letter from a music academy in a distant city. They had heard of her performances and were curious to see her play. They invited her to participate in a series of workshops and masterclasses, offering guidance from highly respected teachers. She felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The opportunity was immense, but so was the challenge. She had mostly learned by herself, and entering a formal environment with other talented musicians would test her in ways she had never experienced before. After considering the offer, she decided to accept. She packed her things, including her cherished sheet music and notes she had made over the years. The journey to the city was long, and during the trip, she reflected on how far she had come. From quiet, unnoticed beginnings to a life filled with music, recognition, and purpose, it had been a remarkable journey. She wondered what new lessons awaited her in the coming weeks, and felt a quiet thrill at the thought of expanding her skill under experienced guidance. Arriving at the academy, she was struck by its grandeur. The halls were lined with portraits of famous musicians, the floors polished to a shine, and the pianos gleamed as though waiting for masters to play them. She was introduced to the instructors and other students, all of whom were skilled and passionate about music. At first, she felt a little out of place, aware of her lack of formal training. But as soon as she sat at the piano, the world around her faded, and her fingers moved with the same instinctive skill that had always guided her. The workshops began with exercises, technique, and rhythm. She observed others, noticing their disciplined approaches and structured methods. Yet, she realized that her self-taught methods had given her flexibility and intuition that could complement formal learning. She absorbed new techniques eagerly, experimenting with phrasing, dynamics, and tone. Each day brought discoveries that deepened her understanding and enriched her musical expression. She felt a sense of growth that was both challenging and exhilarating. During one masterclass, she was asked to play a particularly difficult piece, renowned for testing even the most advanced pianists. Her heart raced, but she remembered the lessons of the past: focus, preparation, and emotional connection to the music. She began to play, and her fingers danced across the keys, precise and expressive. The instructors and students watched in awe, noting the depth of feeling she brought to the piece. Her technique, combined with natural musical intuition, created a performance that was both flawless and moving. After the performance, one of the instructors approached her, praising her skill and emotional expression. They discussed ways to refine her technique, suggesting exercises that could further enhance her control and speed. She listened carefully, eager to learn but also aware of her own strengths. She understood that her journey was not about replacing what she had learned on her own, but about expanding and refining it. The balance between self-taught intuition and formal guidance became a key focus in her development. In the following weeks, she faced new challenges. She had to perform in front of larger audiences, collaborate with other musicians, and tackle compositions she had never attempted before. Each experience was daunting at first, but she embraced them with determination and curiosity. She learned to manage nerves, to adapt quickly, and to communicate with other performers through subtle cues and shared understanding. Her growth was evident not only in her playing, but in her confidence and presence. One evening, she was asked to participate in a special recital for the Academy. It would be attended by renowned musicians, critics, and fellow students. The piece she chose was one that combined technical difficulty with emotional depth. As she sat at the piano, she felt the familiar rush of excitement and focus. Her hands moved instinctively, and the music flowed naturally, conveying stories, feelings, and experiences that words could not capture. The audience was captivated, experiencing the full range of emotion she poured into each note. After the recital, she received